Good morning, everyone. I am Michelle Johnson. I am an associate and affiliate for the Center for Media Literacy. I want to welcome you to the sixth and final segment of our six-part webinar. Our theme today is NATO Delegations in Media Literacy in Governments, Leading the Way for More Resilient Global Citizens. Before I introduce our very distinguished panel, I'd like to just get some housekeeping things out of the way. If you are not speaking, please put your microphone on mute so that there's not background noise and we can hear our speakers. And also, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We may not get to all of them because this hour tends to just fly by, but we will do our best, especially if there are multiple people asking the same question or the same type of question. I'd like to introduce briefly our three panelists today in the order that they will be speaking. Kristina Kaihari is from Finland. She's senior advisor to the Finnish Nation Agency for Education and head of national curriculum section for history and social studies and economics, subjects including entrepreneurship, education and civics in basic and upper secondary education. She's involved in future competencies. Irene Andriopoulou is in Greece. She is a media analyst with interest in old and new digital media theories, serves as a co-secretary general of International Steering Committee of the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance. Senem Çevik is from the United States and Turkey, originally from Turkey. She's a communications scholar specializing in public diplomacy. She's taught international studies courses at UC Irvine, UCLA, Ablim University, and Ankara University. Her research focuses on the intersections of identity, communication, and psychology with an emphasis on Turkey. And she is a scholar and practitioner of cultural diplomacy, peace building, and experiential learning. So we are really in for a very interesting discussion today. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our first panelist, Kristina Kaihari.
Thank you. First of all, I try to open the PowerPoints, which is always a challenge.
Yes, the technology.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. No. Is it okay? Can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. So, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be in this seminar. First of all, some background about the role of media and literacy in the Finnish society in a historical perspective. Media and Finnish language journals had an important role already at the end of the 20th century when Finnish nation was under construction, in a nation building phase, distributing information for all, fostering the position of Finnish language. Swedish had been the official language for centuries. Finnish identity, culture, and educating all the population, the poor and the rich, were fundamental issues in 19th century. And Finnish journals had as well the same mission. The journals, excuse me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Someone needs to put it on their mute.
Okay. So the journals and reading skills have always had an important role. The Lutheran Church required every adolescent at the age of 15 reading skills. If you were not able to read the Bible, you were not allowed to marry. In schools, civic skills were seen as well crucial already in the 19th century. So the civics subject, or social study as we very often call it, subject has been compulsory for over 100 years in Finnish schools. history and civic skills anchor the citizen into the society. Knowing about the society, its structures, how it functions, the rights and responsibilities of citizens in participating, influencing and developing the democratic society are crucial as well in historical perspective. And we also have to know what is happening around us and in the entire world. And of course, media is the fourth state power. Following media and news is and has been a normal part of civics subject of teaching and learning, and as well an essential Finnish tradition. Media literacy is one of the civic skills, and as taught as well through Finnish language and literacy subject and other subjects. In Finnish schools, there have always been a big selection of school subjects, since wide general education and knowledge have been seen fundamental for all the citizens and development of the society. And that is number one, like wide and profound general education and knowledge is the best vaccine against misinformation and propaganda, how we see it like that. And still some specificities in Finland to contextualize a bit. An aspect that illustrates the society and the role of the citizens in Finland is the Parliament Act from 1906. It established the unicameral parliament of Finland, and both women and men were given the right to vote and stand for elections. Thus, Finnish women became the first in the world to have unrestricted rights, both to vote and to stand for parliament in 1906. And another interesting thing is that Finland is a society of trust, and it's a very transparent society. So according to the Transparency International, Finland is number one, like non-corrupted country. Finland is an international leader in government and ministry transparency as well. There is a very strong trust among the Finnish people in the society, like police officers, defense forces, schools, media, president, even politicians. So there is strong confidence. And we don't have any inspection system for schools because we can trust on schools and teachers that they are doing their work like they should be. And then there's one thing which is a key for the good results in schools of Finland. Finnish teachers are the key. They are very well trained, requirement of master's degree and profound pedagogical training for over decades. But coming to media education, then in 1950s we talked about audiovisual education. In 1960s, newspaper education, where Finland was forerunner, and cinema education. And we began to speak about information society. In 1970s, mass media and audiovisual education came as well in schools curriculum. 1980s, the term communication education was settled. 1990s, of course, information technology and literacy was a new issue and term. And 1990s to 21st century, media and information literacy, digital media literacy. And then I'll go to the curriculum. In Finland, it is so that we have subject-based curriculum, but there are transversal competencies from the first classes, from the age of 7. And these transversal competencies are each linked with all the subjects, so that in the school curriculum they have to write down how they are implementing them. And as you can see, there are like, for example, number 1, thinking and learning to learn competence, and then there is multiliteracy. So we speak about multiliteracy, and media literacy is one part of it. It is a kind of wider concept, and then ICT competence, of course, and multiliteracy and ICT competence have a key role in developing media and information literacy. And identifying mis- and disinformation is a part of the Finnish school curriculum from the first classes and already in early childhood education and care. It is part of media literacy, or as we define, wider multiliteracy, as well as information and digital literacy. Since in teaching and learning the topics are handled through authentic texts, the pupils get a concrete understanding which kind of misleading information they might face, how they recognize this kind of information, and what kinds of motives the publisher might have, and why it is important to recognize misinformation. It is fundamental to learn to identify and compare reliable sources. That is one of the key skills to be learned through history subject and all the other subjects as well. And there is just very quickly the objectives of transversal competence number 1. So you can see that there are many aspects connected to information and how to handle it, and to consider things from different viewpoints, to seek new information, to use information independently and in interaction with others, and to analyze the topic being discussed critically from different viewpoints. So, and then multiliteracy that I just mentioned, so it is like a wider concept. And there are as well like visual literacy. Now more and more there are pictures, there are like YouTube videos and very much visual information nowadays. And then here are some examples of some school subjects, how this kind of critical thinking skills are coming by different subjects, and history is very important because there we are like working with the sources and evaluating their reliability, and misuse of history is every day everywhere, so it is so important to learn about these issues. And as well in scientific studies, if you think about all these conspiracy theories, how important it is to have good knowledge, profound knowledge, and to seek these things, and then some other subjects. And very quickly I'll show you that last spring when Russian attacked Ukraine, we provided schools with materials how they can use all this media information that comes from that war, like in media literacy and critical media literacy, and so it is quite useful for media literacy to use these kinds of materials, and it is of course going on. And not only that, there are many other things that are happening all around the world, and how to take them, these thinking about media literacy and critical thinking skills. And here I show you some tools that we are using in Finland. There are some universities, 5 universities together that they are at the same time making research, and then they are providing schools with many kinds of materials and platforms to foster critical media literacy. And then it is important that the kids are producing own material, because it helps the student to understand that whoever can easily produce contents for a big public. Pictures and videos can be falsified very easily, and so on. In a big picture, it is fundamental to realize that what kind of impact mis and disinformation can have to the society and to the democracy, which we definitely want to defend. And then this is from our websites, where we have got as well many kinds of other materials for media education. And the National Broadcasting Company in Finland have got a special role. So they have got a kind of mission from the state that they are like producing many kind of materials. The broadcasting company has a public service task. Information, education, or entertainment, whatever is of interest, is a public service. The Finnish Broadcasting Company, which will soon be celebrating its 100 years anniversary, is a media company owned by Finns, and it has had the same task for those 100 years, to inform, educate, and entertain. So there are as well many kinds of actors that we are cooperating with. This fact-checking bar is all the time producing materials for schools to identify mis and disinformation, and so there are some other Finnish Society on Media Education, and this you might know, this is Media Education Lab, and there are as well very useful materials and tools for schools. This is a Finnish Nordic project or a platform where they are producing all the time digital information literacy materials. So cooperation is very crucial, very important, and the state of Finland is as well, of course, supporting this very much. We are having very good cooperation in Finland, and we have got quite a wide consensus about our education system and about everything that is happening in the society. So it is good. So I've got some links, and sorry, maybe my time is over, I think.
Thank you, Kristina. That is just fascinating where Finland is and how far they've come and the priority that they've placed on media literacy. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Irene, and turn it over to her.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, good day, good morning. Here it is evening, so good evening from Athens, Greece. I'm Irene Andriopoulou. I am a member of the European Commission Expert Group on Disinformation and Digital Literacy, and also Co-Secretary General of UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance. I'm going to try and share my screen. Is it okay now? Okay, so I am very glad to be with you today to this webinar, because this collaboration among NATO and the Center for Media Literacy is a unique one, and it is between a major stakeholder, a global stakeholder, and a media literacy pioneer. And the results of these webinar series, I believe that they can lead to maximum visibility and put media literacy more high in the policy agenda. So the topic of this webinar is resilience through media literacy. So while I was preparing for this discussion today, I wanted to reflect more on the term resilience. So what do we mean with resilience? And I looked it up in the dictionary and came up with two definitions. The first one, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. And the second, the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. So starting from these two main notions, toughness and elasticity, I immediately saw the interrelation with media and information literacy, which is our main focus today. Toughness is about shielding yourself from any risk, danger, and refers to protectionism, whereas elasticity is the ability, the flexibility that media literacy has or should have in order to engage with empowerment issues. So it is true that governments today, they tend to start easier with engaging the protectionist approach on media literacy, and that makes sense because it is linked to the general protectionist state approach, and empowerment comes secondly. In the case of media literacy, both are needed in order to achieve critical media autonomous identities and democratic resilient societies. So media is the significant other in our daily praxis. Modern approach to media education is not followed always by a reflective attitude towards the content, but rather by a craze on new techniques, on new filters, the special effects for the most impressive and high impact follows attraction result. Meanwhile, the time that children and youth spend online has doubled since 2010. And according to the European Commission questionnaire, children daily spend or almost all of their time in front of a screen. So we have new media identities for children and young people. We're talking about the digital natives that Prensky described. We're talking about the Gen Z ambassadors born in the late 90s until the late zeros. And we're talking about the screen-born nation. The approach by UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance is that MIL is the new alphabet of reading and writing through the media. Young people use new technologies today to communicate, to interact, to consume, to learn, to create and share media experiences. Before I move into Greece, I would like to mention some major global media and information literacy policy developments. which they took part the past 2 years. So I will start with UNESCO Abuja Declaration on global financing for media information literacy that was signed by 65 countries during 11th UNESCO Global Media Information Literacy Week in October 2022, where media information literacy is mentioned as the panacea, which is actually a Greek word referring to a holistic remedy. So I was very impressed. So it is described as a panacea to the global scourge of fake news and calls for support and serious funding on media information literacy. Then there was the United Nations Transforming Education Summit that took place in New York in September 2022. And media literacy was the first time associated closely with digital skills and school digital transformation. Also, the United Nations 2020 resolution on forcing and promoting strengthening national media information literacy policies. And of course, the European Commission recently launched guidelines. Excuse me. So these are the European Commission guidelines for education, for educators on disinformation and building on digital literacy skills in school and lifelong learning. I will come back to these later. But all these decisions, all these political decisions and developments, they show clearly that schools should adopt media information literacy either as a core unit or as a interdisciplinary and cross-curricular format through making use of the abundant digital resources and opportunities. So let's move to the Greek factor. During the pandemic, as in many countries, media information literacy became a trending topic. Everyone was talking about it, related it mostly to health media literacy. So it also came up as a viable solution for e-learning, remote school education, e-coaching, home working, and the main media literacy actors in Greece currently at the moment we can find it in academia, in the pedagogical and journalist and mass media communication faculties. We can find it in typical education within the Ministry of Education, within lifelong learning context, such as the work is being done by ECOME. Very strong presence among the creative industry. All the kids film youth festivals in Greece deal with screen literacy, visual literacy, or film literacy. Also in civic society, we have many grassroots projects to bottom up. In the private sector, there are many EU-funded projects, such as the recent one, Educability, which are MOOCs actually on MIL. And of course, we had this Greek digital spring during the pandemic, where new actors on digital media and resources came up and were freely available. And it is also fairly present among the internet service providers. We can find it some web pages, websites on the protectionist approach in social media and within the internet. It is completely absent among the broadcasters, the public service broadcasters, all the media regulators here in Greece, although the National on television and radio, they are working with ERGA, which is the European body on audiovisual regulators, and they are working with media literacy, so there is a correlation there. And there are many projects on disinformation run by journalist associations, professional unions, every now and then. So according to the regulation, Greece implements the European Audiovisual Media Service Directive that was finalized in 2018 by the European Commission, and it is being implemented in Greece since 2021 into the Greek law 4799. And actually in the articles 32 and 35, where it is clearly stated that member states shall promote and take measures for the development of media literacy skills. So within this context, every member of the European Commission, they have to submit a 3-year report on the levels of media. And the first report, country report, will be submitted from Greece and the other members in 19th of December 2022, in a few days. And there's also a new recent law on that, among other things, mentions and deals with fake news and disinformation online and offline. And there is some there is also imprisonment and the penalty for those who attempt to spread disinformation and fake news online, and the media providers are also included. So in typical education, media literacy is not yet met as an autonomous object of study. You can find it mainly cross-curricularly as an interdisciplinary subject within ad hoc school projects such as Digicode Week or the UNESCO Global MIL Week. There are multiple programs on media literacy, film literacy, news literacy, and gaming literacy that also Kristina mentioned. We use gaming as a tool to develop critical media literacy skills. And in 2021, there was this new school initiative, Platform 21 Plus Skills Labs, that they started optional, but then they were made compulsory within the school curriculum. So you can see these four main units, and they are applicable to preschool, primary, secondary education. All the teachers and educators, they can talk about these four categories, and they can choose. They have some hours within a week where they can choose to talk about these skills, and media literacy is included under ICT skills. So that was a very good development in school, because for the first time, media literacy is clearly mentioned as an object of study in school. We have also the National Network on Media Literacy, where ECOME and the Ministry of Education and Education Radio Television, which is a department of Ministry of Education, it was launched last year, 2021 to 2024. So it's approved by the Ministry of Education, addresses all educators, primary, secondary education, and the intervention films are television, film, internet, and digital media. So we conduct workshops, we produce open educational material, masterclass, and we provide also a mail network among the school community. And actually, last week, there was the first training session for this year, the second year, and we asked the educators, what are the topics that you want us to focus this year? And this is what they replied. They replied, digital games, screen film education. They're very interested in video making and filmmaking and documentary that are also associated with history lessons, history units in the classroom. Also disinformation and fake news, advertising, commercial literacy, and copyrights. But they don't necessarily have all the resources to deal with these issues. So now a very strong actor in Greece is also ECOME, which was created in 2015, but fully active from 2018. So it's a national entity supervised by the Ministry of Digital Governance and conducts synergies with media stakeholders in Greece and abroad and the creative industry. The third pillar is the educate pillar, where we deal with media literacy, news literacy. You can see all the subfields, library, archiving, visual literacy, and it is actually the Greek Media Literacy Hub. We are using evidence-based research to move practice into the classroom. So we're producing publications such as the white paper on MIL in 2018. We are translating material by UNESCO, such as the Make Click Pact, Think Critically, Click Wisely. We're producing our own film study and media literacy study guides for the educators and students. Overall, we act as a facilitator within the school community and also in non-typical education. And one of our most successful projects is the school contest on media content creation, gaming, archives, and digital media. In some, we invite children and students to create their own media product, and share it with the rest of the school community, and then follow the pedagogical method of learn by doing. We also work closely with UNESCO, and we adopt the UNESCO definition on media and information literacy, the skills to access, critically evaluate, and creatively express in the media and information providers field as a prerequisite for active citizen skills in open, democratic, and resilient societies. So our approach, we have a threefold approach: the basic skills, which are the technical, the access skills to a media platform content. Then the advanced skills, which have the critical cognitive component, filtering messages, analyzing, critical thinking, and then vocational skills, where we are addressing young media professionals that want to work in the creative industry. So this is just an abstract from our white paper that through MIL skills, citizens of today, they are no longer passive recipients of media messages, but they adopt an active and critical attitude towards the news agenda, making wiser choices and contributing to the quest for high quality media content, which is a very important issue, quality media content. This is just an overview of our international cooperation. We work with the European Commission, with EAVI, which are this is the European Association for Youth Interests, with CIMUSER, with the SOMA, the Social Observatory for Disinformation, and of course with UNESCO, where we are coordinating the EU Sub-Saharan Mediterranean Group. It was formed in 2018 in Lithuania, and by today we have over 50 members from 11 Mediterranean countries, one transnational, and the aim is to promote the scopes of UNESCO MIL Alliance and coordinate our actions and policies in the Mediterranean region for a broader momentum in the area. So throughout this time, we have activated 5 task forces. We have produced 2 booklets, 8 webinar series. They're all available online from e-commerce YouTube. We produce bi-monthly news bulletins. This is just the map of the members of the Mediterranean group. These are countries only that are in the Mediterranean region. And just some of our partners. We have members from the academia, from regulatory authorities, from broadcasters, from media education associations, organizations, NGOs. So it's we follow this interdisciplinary approach. So our members come from different fields, but all related to media literacy one way or another. So this is just a view of our MIL webinar series. We did webinars on disinformation, on kids content, on digital skills, on AI. 2 years, it was during the pandemic where we could not meet physically with our members and our community. We had participation from 41 countries globally to these webinars. And this is our latest project, actually, that I invite all of you to be part of it. This is a call for articles for a new publication we are organizing in 2023 under the title MIL in the post-pandemic era, takeaways and challenges on a global scale. And global is not some mistake, it's taking things, case studies, local case studies that can arise as global initiatives and vice versa. And the abstract submission is December 31st. And articles submission is by March 30th. So there is time, but please, it is addressed not only to the members of European Sub-Saharan Mediterranean Group, but to all experts, academics, practitioners that can elaborate on some case studies that are interesting to explore during the pandemic. It will be in English. So I would like to close with the EU trends and challenges. Of course, it is about combating disinformation. Of course, it is about dealing with information chaos and the plethora of media messages everywhere. It was a thematic priority for 2021 in the EU e-twinning, which is a school network, European school network. It will be the focus of the new funding scheme, Creative Europe Media Program, Disinfo and Digital Skills and AI. Recently, this code of practice on disinformation was launched and agreed among the major, the fact checkers, the media stakeholders, the online platforms, and they are forced to comply with this code of practice on disinformation. And of course, there are the ongoing country reports by the Audiovisual Media Service Directive. These new European Commission guidelines, they are addressed to educators. They are available in English and in other languages also. They're free to download. So I encourage you, all the educators and teachers, to make use of this open educational resource in the classroom. You can find many examples, practical teaching and learning tips, activity plans in the classroom, also a glossary to begin with. And they are accompanied by a policy report, a European Commission policy report from the member states, which is very useful for policymakers and stakeholders to reflect and have an overview on the field. So I encourage you to look for them and download. Because media information literacy, it is closely linked to digital knowledge economies, and the key prerequisites for MIL in schools are upskilling. We need to shift from traditional alphabet skills to new visual culture and abundant learning materials, reskilling, enhance traditional literacy skills with the new digital skills, to deal with wise content management and access to open educational resources, understand what is pre-banking and debunking skills in the school community, and of course see the relevance of media literacy to artificial intelligence and metaverse, because digital is not a second-hand reality. The hybrid world is real, even with an equal access across the globe. So now it is a time, post-pandemic wise, it is a time to rethink critically and act proactively during this hybrid economy digital knowledge model and explore new MIL challenges. And through my nearly 20 years engagement with MIL, the pointed challenge has always been reaching like concentric circles an MIL consensus, a consensus for all aspects of our digital life. And I would like, UNESCO is doing a great job in highlighting and putting it very high in the policy agenda, and we can't be more thankful than that. And I would like to end with this rhetorical question: we're going digital, but are we going media and information literate after all? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Irene. That's very interesting what's being done in the region and in Europe. I want to turn things over to Senem now. She's our respondent, and she has some information about, she's an expert on Turkey as well. So, Senem.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Michelle. I actually learned a lot from Kristina and Irene. Thank you. It's really an honor to be amongst all of you, media literacy scholars and experts. So when I was listening to Kristina and Irene, it was fascinating to learn about how much this has really been ingrained, the media literacy and the idea to empower citizens. And it got me thinking, maybe this is a conversation that we can have, and I'm going to try to keep it short, and I'm going to plug in the example of Turkey. The disconnect between protectionism and empowerment, and the theme of our discussion is we've had two examples of empowering citizens to combat disinformation, misinformation, and conspiracy theories. And on the other hand, we have sometimes extreme protectionism to quote unquote protect citizens from what kind of disinformation or what kind of, misinformation. And it got me thinking, the concept of is state in the service of people or people in the service of the state? I think in the examples of Kristina and Irene, we're seeing where the state and the government entities are trying to empower its citizens, help educate its citizens in the service of people. And we have other systems where, in contrast, people are in service of the state and the government, which means the disinformation, conspiracies, and misinformation can be fit in whoever defines them. And that basically brings me to the protectionism element when it comes to media literacy. A new social media law titled Disinformation Law, but basically dubbed as censorship law, was passed recently in Turkey, which is a NATO country. And now authorities basically have the right to control and restrict free speech on social media or other platforms. It's a way to control also the opposition and any dissident voices. And it aims to criminalize misinformation, but then who defines the truth, right? And I think in the example of Greece and Finland, the citizens recognize the civic duties with the help of the government, with the help of the state, and the civic duties come together in a package with media literacy. So again, state being in the service of people, not people working for the state. And I think this is a very I don't know what the middle ground of this is, protectionism and empowerment. And the middle ground would be, can the state and the people work together? And can they find a middle ground? And this is also connected to the types of governments that we have, more, authoritarian governments that we see around the world today. Maybe I missed in the previous workshops, but I don't know if we had an example from India, for example, or Brazil, but we spoke about Russia definitely today, but there are other cases that also have stifled sort of free flow of information, and that impacts how citizens receive their resources. But I want to also add is, I think the problem when tackling disinformation and misinformation coming from external resources, for example, Russia or China, is also dependent on political alliances that we often tend to ignore, but it is a big, it has a major role. In the example of Turkey, for example, although Turkey is a NATO ally, it's been very close working relationship with Russia, and China as well, has financial relations with both of these countries, and it has an impact on how this state approaches media literacy and how its state approaches freedom of speech in general. So where a government situates itself in respect to other countries or alliances, and how complicit they are, is also demonstrative of their media literacy policies, I think. Like I said, in Turkey, in complete contrast to Finland and Greece, there are other laws that have been implemented right now to actually stifle and limit free speech. People can go to jail if there is disinformation they're spreading that the government doesn't like. So that's the extreme protectionism side. And I'm curious to hear from all of you also, where is the middle ground of this protectionism and empowerment? And how can maybe non-Western states, especially in the global South, can interact with the states in the North. The North and South divide is very present here, I think, when it comes to media literacy. And how can we bridge that divide? I don't have an answer for it, but I'm curious to hear and start a discussion maybe. But what really struck me in Kristina's presentation is how she said history, civic skills, literacy has been integral to Finland from the beginning. And every country is different, and civic skills, how can other countries learn from these examples and implement, even though they may not have the exact same democratic levels or systems? So more transparency was very striking to me, for example. Your microphone.
So you were asking me, or?
Michelle, I couldn't hear you. Your microphone was off.
I've had all kinds of technical difficulties today. But thank you, Senem. Such astute points and observations there, and really opened up to some very healthy questions and ideas. Kristina or Irene, do either of you have any thoughts about some of the questions that Senem posed?
I think it's worthwhile to discuss the mutual learning that it can happen, especially it's a very critical time that we're in, and
it's very tricky actually and challenging, because governments, be democratic or not, they don't. I mean, they choose to go with a protectionist approach, because if they empower, the citizens too much, then it could be turned against them, because most of the news agenda is politicized and being driven, by current governments. So the news agenda setting is very complex. So that's why they are the ministries of education maybe are intimidated to use them as an open window, but more like how to protect yourself from risks online, how to find good quality content. It's very tricky.
Okay.
I think it becomes a problem when sorry. Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
I was just saying it becomes a problem, I think, when, again, the protectionism or the sort of organizations or institutions that a government develops, it, shapes the information space. Turkey, for example, has not a ministry, but Office of Communications, which oversees all sorts of communications. And so it creates and shapes messages for the public and the international space.
Yeah, we have an interesting comment from Iglika. She says the weaker a country's democracy, the more protectionist the state's approach to media literacy. We really are in an interesting time in terms of where nations, including the United States, are in making that determination of where that line is. Media literacy sits on the empowerment side, and most people from more democratic backgrounds want to see people empowered to make wise decisions on their own. That is a first line of defense, if you want to say, against this. And Finland is a great example of that. They've been doing this longer than almost anybody, so they're very far along in that. They also, something Kristina said that I think makes a lot of sense, it's a nation that has a high level of trust. And trust is something that is, here in the United States, has been degraded, especially in the last decade or so. It's never been perfect, but we've really had, with the division of, you know, these echo chambers and bubbles where people are getting headlines that are different than another group of people, and they become more and more inflammatory, and this degraded trust in institutions, that threatens democracy. And I think that threat to democracy in turn threatens governments' decisions, leaning more toward protectionism and away from empowerment. You know, media literacy, we want to see it heavily weighted on the empowerment side. Some protectionism, I don't think it has no place in it. I mean, there are people I was just listening on the radio recently about the workers at Facebook who are in charge of deciding what does and does not get on the platform, and that they suffer from very high rates of PTSD, because these are the people who are watching these videos of beheadings and all of this. At some point, something has to not be allowed. But to weight things as much as possible on people being able to make decisions for themselves, I think speaks to the basic tenets of democracy. Any other thoughts on that? I'm looking at the chat here.
I think it would be very interesting to hear how either the panelists or the participants, what they think, sort of how do governments have that balance? How do they balance between being protectionist, but also, you know, asserting what they want to assert, and how they can find that balance? I don't know that there's a country that does it really well. I mean, maybe Finland, but I feel like we always point to Finland as being a great example of everything. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of that about that.
I'm not knowledgeable about other countries, but again, I think India is an interesting example to follow. Sort of, you know, preached as a positive example, a growing democracy and a growing influence in the region and the world. However, we do see ethnic and religious conflict taking place in India, and the BJP government, it's a nationalist right-wing government, inserting itself and you know, positioning itself in a way that it, instead of empowering its citizens to combat misinformation, it feeds that cycle of misinformation and disinformation and hatred against certain groups, members of groups. I think we saw similar examples in Myanmar, where the government was complicit to misinformation and disinformation and conspiracies. So I actually don't know if there's a middle ground or examples where there are some limitations, and especially with Twitter currently with Elon Musk's rule or governance of Twitter, things can also change when it comes to how each government, each state is working with these social media, you know, companies, because there are demands by governments to sort of block certain users, which then affects the news cycle, freedom of speech.
Yeah, I think the reason everybody is, you know, we are all, I think, globally looking for that answer, for that balance. And I don't think it's going to be the same for every country. So it's a wonderful discussion, because I think that what we are talking about here is what every nation is grappling with, in that, especially since these platforms, they seem so integral in our lives right now, but they're fairly new. And we have sort of a cultural lag where people, governance hasn't really reconciled what these platforms do to publics in terms of legal, social, even religious aspects. So I think this is the key question, and I'm hoping in the coming years answering that becomes the key focus. Any other comments about that? Okay, this is interesting from Dr. Chero Leary. I just heard on NPR that this year is one where most journalists have been killed. Russia has just jailed a key outspoken dissident. The Chinese protests have had an impact, but speaking out in Russia can get you behind bars for years. Yeah. Yeah, and that goes back, you know, when you're talking about these more authoritarian states, that really, it's very dangerous. And Jeffrey Perone, in the book I'm currently reading, Change, How to Make Big Things Happen by Damon Santola, he describes the Chinese government suppressing dissension by flooding the social media channels with distracting content produced by the 50-cent party propaganda machine, rather than simply censoring it. Interesting, the tactics that they're using. Not sure if this technique has a name yet. Yeah, you know, so we're really so all over the map with this. Are there any other questions or comments?
Can I speak?
Yes, yes.
Hi, this is such a fascinating and painful discussion, really, because that there are people losing their lives to speak out, to try to give whatever truth is. I think that's part of what we're talking about. We're talking about truth. And it's, you know, I think I've thought for a long time that we need to teach philosophy in the schools to the very youngest, and look at certain kinds of basic principles of governance everywhere, of honorableness. I mean, I'm an American. I am totally beside myself with, you know, what's happening here? And how do you begin? This, to me, I mean, you know, I'm sure we all read George Orwell, Once Upon a Time, and it feels to me so much like this is Orwellian right now. That, you know, a new truth, alternative facts, says one of Trump's advisors used to call it. Alternative facts will come to the fore, and then, you know, people don't know what to believe. Also, we reinforce by reading the sources that we typically go to and watch and interact with. So again, it seems on one level so basic, like when you talk about a third way. But where does it start? I think education is where it starts. But look what in America, you know, now the very right wing has figured out that if you run for the school board, or if you know, criticize and negate curriculum, and so teachers are afraid of speaking out.
Yeah, it is a scary time. I don't want to deny that. Media literacy is, you know, it is not a panacea. but it is a foundation in finding answers to these questions. And as you're saying, it can be very disempowering to look around. Media literacy's job is to empower. So it is, it can be, I agree with you, the things that you're talking about, I think about all the time. But what gives me a little bit of light in it is that discussions like this are happening. And media literacy is, this webinar series was sponsored by NATO. That would never have happened, years ago. So I don't want to end on a completely negative note, although everything you're saying is valid. And part of my commitment to doing the work in media literacy that I do is based exactly on that's why I'm here and why a lot of us are here. But we really are grappling with some big questions. And I think that media literacy is part of our answer. With that, we are at time and a couple minutes past. I want to thank our panelists. They were all amazing. And thank all of you for being here. There will be a YouTube link to this video, as to all of the videos of the 6 webinars that you will be receiving. And I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, or evening, based on where you are in the world.